Hello, welcome back to the studio. I'm glad you could come back and visit again. Always pleased to welcome friends and new friends. My name is Sharon Hurst and I paint predominantly in watercolour, but enjoy pencil work and pastel and crafting, all sorts of arts. I wondered if, like me, you have a lot of brushes sitting, gathering dust and cobwebs in either your art room or in a nice little folder in your art box. I bet you have. I bet you have. We've all fallen victim, haven't we, to the odd art show or the artist who said to you, you must have this brush. This is the best brush ever. You can do this, this, this and this with it. And the problem is, by the time we all get home, we've completely and utterly forgotten what this, and this was. I've done it. I'm sure you've done it too. And as a consequence, they sit there in your nice little folder, don't they? And you think to yourself, oh, I'll look at that one day and I'll see what I can do with it. And that day just never seems to arrive, does it? Well, I'm thinking today is going to be the day, and you and I together are going to challenge these brushes and we're going to brush our dusty cobwebs off and have a go and see what we can do with them. I've got all of these here. Some of them are my absolute favourites, and there are a couple there that I don't use very much, but let's just have a little look at them and see what we can achieve, and maybe it might change your ideas as to what we will be doing and how we will be doing it in future. I hope it helps. Let's start with this. This is the Coma brush. It's so called because when you look at it, I'll bring you down and in to have a bit of a squiz. The top of it, the top third, has all kind of been cut into so that it looks like a comb. I mean, this is why it's called a coma. And it's very, very useful for hair, fur, special effects. Let me show you some of them and you see what you think and what you can make of them. Simple, first and foremost, if I take some green paint, I'm just going to take some green on my brush and using an upwards motion, I hope you can see me if I work a bit cack-handed like this, and if we do this, I've got quite a decent little tussock of grass. I'm going to rinse my brush and just dab off the excess liquid and then come in underneath and ground that little tussock. And I've got quite a decent little bit of grass there. I can add some more if I want to, just by using the brush sideways now instead of full on, but sideways. And I can bring some extra bits and pieces up through here. And then I can use the side of the brush if I want to for some seed heads. So that's one way to use that, quite useful, quite interesting. I like this brush if I'm painting and working with cats and fur, because if you take, now this is just Payne's Grey, bit of Payne's Grey, but you've got to use the brush quite dryly, so you need to get rid of the extra paint, because we're going to now come in here and fluff fur. And again, I'm going to bring you right in so that you can see this. Lightly, lightly, lightly. That is dry brushwork, because it's obvious, isn't it? The brush is almost dry, and the more you go over it, the darker it will become, of course, like so. If I work sideways, I wonder if it might be more convenient for you to see what I'm doing. So you see on the edge of a pussycat or a little dog, that would be quite interesting to add all the fine, fine hairs of fur. But if you go in there and your brush is too wet, I'm going to use a different colour and use more fluid, more water. If I come in there, it gives me a much stronger look, not as textured. Right, so this really works for those teeny tiny hairs all around the face and the muzzle. This you could use for longer hair. So if you're talking about a longer haired dog or pussycat and your painting was bigger, then you might want to go in for that. So using it sideways, using it flat on. And the drier the brush becomes, the more interesting the brush marks and the strokes become. So that is a comber, really useful. I like it as well. If I were painting something like a tree trunk, I would load my brush. This is burnt sienna. And I'm also going to put some raw sienna on the brush as well. So I've got both colours on there, and I'm going to just dry them off. And imagine you have a tree trunk. Let me just draw it so that you can see where I'm going with this. If I have those two colours on the brush, not too wet, I can bring that round the trunk, maybe some from the other side. Let's go from the other side as well. It gives me the ability to cut down the side of the tree to paint my edges like that. And then perhaps if it's a bit of a mossy tree, so now I'm going into my green. This is my sap green. And how about that acid orangey yellow lichen that we find on trees? So this is cadmium orange. You might want to be adding a little bit of that hither and yon. And then maybe if it's something like a silver birch tree, I'm going back to my Payne's Grey. And again, dabbing because I don't want it too wet. And now I could come in . I like very much this dry brush technique. Leave the light down the middle of the tree. See, that's quite exciting, isn't it? You could use all sorts of colours for that. Previously, in one of our other exercises, we mixed up some cerulean blue and burnt umber, and that's a very good colour to underpaint the whole lot, let it dry and then do this, and that can be quite exciting as well. I like that very much. So that is that's a comber brush. Comber, so called because it's cut along the top of the hairs just like a comb. Very interesting. It's a good brush. I use that a lot. I use it for removing paint as well as anything else. It's a good little scratchy brush to bring colour out. So that's another option. Let's move that round here so that we're back to square one so that we can see. A flat brush. Well, there's a flat brush for you. Just a little tiny flat brush. Good one this for getting in there and softening things. So if we wanted to come in and just, because it tends to be quite a firm brush, whereas you wouldn't get this manoeuvrability with a round brush. So you can come in and you can soften lines if you want to. It's good for removing, and I know you don't make mistakes, but just saying, if we wanted to soften that as well, we could come in there and soften that even more. But this is good for coming in, if we've got something and we don't want it, you can come in and you can just use it to scrub the problem away. And with a bit of tissue, you can dab in there and you can use this as your removal tool. But when it's clean, she says putting dirt on the paper. Oh, really? Duh. I don't know. With all the best intentions in the world. Now, In addition, this is a lovely little brush for something as simple as, this is burnt sienna, and I'm adding a little bit of alizarin crimson to it. And I can come in here, and it's a lovely way to, this is a sludgy brown, this is dirt from my palette. It's a lovely way to paint a brick wall, bricks, one brick. You've got to get the pattern right, haven't you? Vary the colours, so again, a bit of Payne's Grey. I've got Payne's Grey on the brush and I've got burnt sienna on the brush. So come in and vary the pattern every now and again with some different colours. But it's a super, super easy way to come in there and to paint the bricks on a house. And just use a brush that's the right size for the job that you need. These come in all different sizes and thicknesses and widths, and you can do that and you've got yourself a nice, easy brick wall against a grass verge. Job done, bosh. So there you go. Very good when I do enjoy a nice Tudor house. So that's a good one for that, you see. You can come in on top when the colour's dried, and you can add a bit of extra colour, different colour, to bring the changes. Drop a bit of salt on top, that would make it even more interesting. So that's a good plan for that. Might be interesting if you were to underpaint the whole lot first with something like, this is raw sienna. This is a lovely colour to put in underneath bricks. So paint in underneath first in raw sienna, because that looks just like the mortar behind bricks. It's the right colour for it. If you were painting dragons, how about this? This is an interesting shape of brush. Look at this. This is a good one, isn't it? So what would you do with that? Well, immediately that says to me I would be using that for dragon scales, thank you very much. So I would be double loading that as well with a bit of blue and a bit of green, and I would be coming in and I would be fish scales, of course. Need a bit of patience because it's ideally you'd want to let that dry before you went moseying in with the next course, but see if I can work it somehow with a darker colour. I don't want to take all your time up. Let it dry, come back, do another layer. It's a nice brush for getting into nooks and crannies because it gives you a good shape. It's a hard shape. You've got the benefits of a flat brush and the benefits of that curve on the top of it. So from every point of view, it gives you the manoeuvrability to draw a straight line as well as a wide line. Good for plants and for stems of plants, because you can go from wide to, you know, really quite thin. And I know you can do that to a certain degree with a nice round brush, but this one, it's not going, it doesn't flop and it doesn't move, it's springy. It's a nylon brush, so I wouldn't want that to be anything else other than a nylon brush, because something like this in sable would flop. So you'd want the spring, the synthetic, so that's quite important. So that's that one. Now, have you seen these? This is called a sword liner, and these are fantastic. Love these for so many different reasons. They take a lot of paint, so we need a wet brush. Here's my filthy dirty palette, look, and you need, this is a reservoir, the whole brush, so you need the whole brush to be filled with paint. So I would actually make myself quite a puddle to start with and fill the whole brush. Watch them because they flick, so you know you can't just squiggle that around, you'll find paint all over your artwork. Load the whole brush like that, the whole lot. And I find that they're best worked up the page. So I would put it there, bend it, curve it, move it, wiggle it, and as you get the dry brush marks it becomes even more exciting. And that can paint you the most gorgeous, gorgeous greenery in the front of a painting if you were looking for reeds and grasses. Let's double load this time. So we've got the blue, lots of blue, and now I'm going to come in here and make up some of this yellow. This is quinacridone gold, scrummy colour. And if I double load with both of these, so there's the gold on the brush, I'm going to turn it over and introduce the blue so you can see that I've got both on there. And now if I come up through the page, interesting. Now people, you'll think I'm balmy, but you see for me that says start again, and every time you come in please reload your brush, because if you don't go in with the same brush it'll be dirty, it'll just make it mud. So now if I come in, and that's a drier brush, look at that, look, I love it, I love it, I love it. That to me is seaweed, mermaid's hair, fish fins. There's so much you can do with that. If you want to, you can just use this brush for little strokes, but look at the gorgeousness of the control that you have for those small strokes. It's elegant, it's interesting, and it's smart. And again, you can use all sorts of different colours there. You can double load, triple load, it's entirely up to you. So that is a sword liner. They can be shorter. You can buy them where they're quite a bit shorter here, and these tend to be called dagger brushes rather than sword liners, but I like the sword liners, you get this beautiful flow. And finally, most of you know this dear little brush. This is one of my favourites. This is a rigger brush. Fine, fine rigger brush for the teeniest, tiniest little controlled hairs. Let me use this sideways because otherwise my hand, I think, is going to be in the way of the camera, and we'll work up on this part of the paper. And again, with something like a rigger brush, you have to use the whole brush. I'm going to take my liquid. You need your paint to be single cream or thinner. If it's any thicker than that, it won't run and flow on the brush. You won't get the lovely desired effect. So here I have, that's Prussian blue, and let's just dip into this quinacridone gold as well. And a rigger brush will give you from a thick line right through to thin. Fine, fine lines. Use this for my cat's whiskers. When you're doing something fine and thin like that, you do need to reload for each brush stroke, and you find that when you put it down, that's your widest point. All right. If that's going to be too thick a line, fill your brush, and then I just get rid of the excess on my cloth, and then that will give me a much thinner line. If you want a thin line, you need to use this brush. It's really difficult to do this with the camera. Tip, you need to be painting with your brush at 90 degrees to get the finest lines. All right. So if I hold my paper sideways, you can see that I am literally painting at 90 degrees to get the fine, fine lines. So you can see the difference now between this here and this up here. So fine, fine lines. Right down the ferrule, work right at the tip so that you're holding it and you're controlling it. Barely touching the paper, and that will give you these gorgeous fine lines over here. But you have to be at 90 degrees to be able to do that. Otherwise your line, of course, is going to be much, much thicker. Good for trees, branches, twigs, cat's whiskers, fur, hair, all of those. Fine, fine lines, they're lovely. Little grasses if you want tufts of grasses. I love my rigger, and again I would suggest that if you were using a rigger brush that you make sure that you use one that is synthetic, because it stays springy. When you use it, it bounces straight back. I find that when I try to work this with a sable, I come away from the paper and it's bent, and I have to reshape it every time before I go back. So you need the spring of a synthetic, I need the spring of a synthetic rigger. There we go, that's brushes. That's a selection of my brushes. I hope that was useful.